questions, and it's my pleasure to now introduce you all to Purushottama Bilimoria. Is that correct? Did
That's,
I?
that's
Did
correct. That's correct.
oh, good. It's my pleasure to introduce your lecture, which I'm looking very forward to. And I understand it will be a lightning speed lecture, but we're doing very good with time, so I hope you feel comfortable.
Sure.
And so allow me to say that you're in my neighborhood, University of San Francisco, and your talk, The Rite of Natality and the Simulation of Rebirth. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Cassandra. I do have connections with Berkeley as well.
Lovely.
Um, and I thank Anna Hannessy for inviting me to this to present my little reflection. I'm not a scholar of birth or rebirth by any stretch of imagination. This is more anecdotal from a personal experience, which I think people will find interesting, and it cuts in with what we've been hearing, especially Bettina Deutschmann's talk about bonding and acceptance and to some extent prenatal process. So it's the rite of natality and simulation of rebirth. So natality is the capacity to begin an erstwhile process anew, and it is fundamental to Hannah Arendt's quest for a world shared by diverse individuals. It embeds the potential to investigate new beginnings, such as Arendt's faith and hope in the world. Natality underscores the capability to create, to cover or unearth what is lost or covered over. Death looks at what is yet to be, while natality is grounded in existential origins and an ontology of action. For Arendt, even though mortality is an unavoidable human condition, natality is significantly fundamental because it is related to freedom and action. To quote, the decisive fact determining man, read human, as a conscious remembering being is birth or natality. That is, the fact that we have entered the world through birth. The decisive fact determining human as a desiring being was death or mortality. The fact that we shall leave the world in death, end quote. As Joanna Verschiarelli Scott put it, quote, in Augustine, Arendt found her central metaphor of natality embedded in the power of love, caritas. That, following Augustine, replicates creation in each new birth, each act of moral will, and in each new contingent constituting of the world in action, end quote. With this concept of natality in mind, I moved to narrate a moment when I was dealing with mortality and grief over a loss of a dear one. Heidegger's adage of thrownness onto death could not have rung truer. Death had knocked on my door, and this hard moment had stayed with me going on to a decade. The existential realization of mortality moved me to contemplate disengaging from the world, if not leaving it, choosing via contemplativa or vita activa. I was cocooned in my solitary life of mind. I could not find a decent way of existing in the world. I felt distant from my family and even friends and colleagues. New relationships I attempted would fall apart miserably, usually in anger and frustration on my part for being accused of being callosely narcissistic during the term of endearment. I thought of myself as a quote unquote living corpse in my own virtually postmortem condition. Postmortem condition. I was then also attending regular sessions with a psychotherapist. After many months of therapy, my therapist convinced me that I had come to reject myself, my own soul, that as it were had dried up, and the heart suffered from the angst of loving and being loved deeply for fear of betrayal by the ontology of life and death, amor fati. That would explain the alleged narcissistic strain. The recovery suggested was a modal rebirth. So it's very interesting that the possibilities of a rebirth. To my surprise, in the next session, the therapist bought a baby doll in a basket, complete with an infant's milk bottle, some small toys, trinkets, imitation fruits, and a blanket. I was utterly befuddled. There began a process of simulated birth of a new baby in which the therapist stood in as midwife, like Socrates assisting in the birth of wisdom. It fell upon me to pick up the newborn from its head as the first point of contact, similar to how a newborn emerges head first, and hold it in my lap, caress it, kiss it, and most of all accept it as my own self being reborn. And a Berkeleyan at that time, I thought this was a very strange experience to undergo. The therapist then asked me to drape the baby in the warm blanket, feed it milk, play jingles from the toys, offer the nourishment of fruits, and share the joy of both giving birth and being born simultaneously. It was an uncanny existential experience, one that was also marked with sudden postpartum transformation, a spiritual rejuvenation, if you like. Though symbolic, as in transference experienced in psychoanalysis, the aura of realism was profound and inescapable. It challenged me to surrender myself to a world of hope, faith in humility, care for self, and trust of love, while being able to re-enter the world. Death could be buried with the old I. A new crystallized I has arisen. Hindu, Jains, and Buddhists have a life cycle practice called samskara, or sacraments that begin with one's birth. Childbirth signifies new beginnings and is celebrated with aplomb. But ontologically, this is also rebirth, reincarnation, as Buddhist, Hindus, and perhaps even Plato believed in it, of a previous soul or karmic bundle, possibly tired and depleted from a prior existential journey that may have also been marred by tragedy and sudden ending, the memory carried forward in the disembodied self or no self. The magic and relief from the harshness of the past are rooted in both the prenatal environment and the natality that is offered to the incoming being, soon to be in a new body and mind. That is exactly what the therapist, unbeknown, had prepared for me and walked me through. Thank you. It's a short anecdotal piece, but quite telling.